In this video, we are going to deploy Hydrolix on Linode Kubernetes engine. We are going to understand why we should use Hydrolix. So without any further ado, let's get started. Alright guys, so I'm inside the Hydrolix docs and let's talk about unique selling proposition of Hydrolix. Why somebody should use Hydrolix over say a traditional database like MongoDB or MySQL. So the challenge is that most of these technologies that we are using today, be it PostgreSQL, MySQL, the thing is that all these databases and technologies are decades old. They are indeed updating and they are being changed as per the needs of modern world. But the thing is that they do not address the biggest problem, which is scale. At this point, the data is increasing day by day. The traditional enterprise data footprints has ballooned from millions to multi-billions, and even trillion row data set has become a commonplace. So when data grows to such large numbers, we need something that can address huge storage needs, and at the same time it should be petabyte scale. So Hydrolix outshines traditional databases like MySQL or MongoDB in handling the challenges posed by the explosion of data in modern enterprise. Unlike MongoDB or say MySQL, which may struggle with massive data set due to its traditional architecture, Hydrolix leverages a distributed system environment, enabling SSD-like performance across petabyte scale data. So in comparison to MongoDB, Hydrolix offers a more efficient and cost-effective approach to managing data with a focus on workload independence and true real-time ingest. So the separation of compute from storage allows Hydrolix to auto-scale services independently. Plus, we will be able to use the power of Kubernetes. Now, Hydrolix's unique storage format and indexing techniques ensure fast performance across entire data footprint, making it superior for handling both historical as well as real-time data. And the fact that we are using modern day technologies like S3 storage, it is superior for handling both types of data, be it historical data, real-time data, or any type of time series data. What exactly is Hydrolix? It's a cloud deployable time series data platform designed for vast volumes of data to ingest, query, manage, and store data. So once we've installed Hydrolix, you will be able to query it by using all these queries, and we'll use a domain to install Hydrolix. So in short, the Hydrolix has reduced storage and indexing cost, and along with that, its support for various data interfaces makes it a compelling choice for enterprises so that they can seek high performance, economically viable solution beyond the capabilities of traditional databases like MySQL or MongoDB or PostgreSQL. So let's come to our Akamai dashboard and let's create a Kubernetes cluster. So in order to deploy Hydrolix on LKE, we'll have to go to the documentation and let's follow all these steps that are provided for deploying Hydrolix to LKE. So we'll prepare a cluster and let's start by clicking on create and then on Kubernetes so that we can create a Kubernetes cluster. And let me name it as Hydrolix. I'll choose the region as US Southeast, and no, I don't want a HA control plane. Let's start with a shared CPU of 2 GB each, and let's create a cluster. It takes some time, but we'll be back once this cluster is created. Okay, now once Kubernetes cluster is up, we'll auto scale it, which means that we'll be able to increase the number of nodes automatically. And before that, let's do one thing. Let's create all these environment variables. So we'll also need a bucket because the bucket stores all the data. So I'll come to my object storage, I'll click on create bucket and I'll call it my Hydrolix, and let's select the region as the same US Southeast 1, and I'll create a bucket. And I think my Kubernetes cluster is almost ready. I'll wait for it to provision all the machines, and let's wait for this to work as well. And in the meantime, I'll click on access keys and I'll create an access key. Let me call it Hydro. Let's click on create and let's wait for it to finish provisioning. Let me copy the access key and secret. I'll do one thing. I'll open terminal. Let me open terminal and I'll go to CD and I'll go to my root, and then I'll create a folder called cube. If you don't have this folder set up already, you will have to create it. So create a folder called .cube and I'll open it in VS Code. Let me create a file called config, and inside this config file, I'll copy and paste the content of this YAML file. So let's download this YAML file Oh, it says download blocked. I want to download this file, hydrolix.-kubeconfig.yaml. I think it's not yet downloaded. Let me see why it's not yet downloaded. Let me click here and it should be able to download this file. And yes, we have this file. Let's copy the content of this file, paste it here. Now, if you don't have kubectl installed, you will have to install it. You can go to Google and search for kubectl, install kubectl, or you should have at least Minikube installed. If you don't have it, you'll have to do it. And once you do it, kubectl will work. So if you type kubectl, you'll see the list of commands like this. And yes, it is going to work. Okay, so we have this kubectl, and I can say kubectl and get, and I can say nodes, and this will give me all the nodes. So kubectl get nodes will show me the nodes, and it will also show me when they are ready or not. So it is 2 minutes old. Nice, all 3 nodes are provisioned. Let's click on Autoscale pool, and we are going to change the minimum nodes to 1 and maximum to 20. Okay, and this is coming from the documentation, by the way. So the documentation says that autoscale your nodes from 1 to 20. And then kubectl --kubeconfig, the name of the config file. But we already have the config file, so we don't have to worry. We already have this config and everything set up here. So kubectl is working. Okay, now let's create all these environment variables. Let me create a file called env. And inside env, since I'm on Windows, I'm going to make it something like this, $, and your region will come here, which is US East 1, if I'm not wrong. US East 1. Let me copy the access keys as well, and let's copy it here, and let's copy this here, and we'll need this later, so we'll keep it here. By the way, we don't need this env file. I'm just creating it for my convenience so that I can edit and change all these regions and everything. So $hdx bucket region is equal to US East 1. Let me see what the region exactly is. I've saved my secret key. I'll come back to buckets and US Southeast 1. Okay, let's copy and let's paste US Southeast 1 here. And yes, US Southeast 1 Hydrolix URL is going to be https huntingcoder.com. I have this domain. So since I have this domain, I'm using this, but if you don't have a domain, you'll have to go to your domain section. I'll show you where exactly is the domain section. You can go to the domain section, and here inside the domain section, you can configure your domain. And if you don't know how to configure a domain, you can go to the docs, and you'll know how to configure domains. Okay, I have told this in my previous videos as well. So you can watch one of those if you are not able to configure a domain. But for this video, let's proceed. Let's enter the admin email as harry@codewithharry.com, and let's create a Kubernetes namespace, and I'm going to name this namespace as my production service. So these are the environment variables which I've created, and I'll come back to my terminal, I'll paste it, and yes, all these environment variables are now created. Now I'll not do source because I'm not on Unix based system, I'm on Windows, and also we'll have to add the bucket URL. Bucket URL is not yet added, so let's add the bucket URL as well. And I'm going to copy this bucket URL from here, hydrolix.us southeast 1, and yes, it is working. Okay, and instead of saying export, I'll use $. I'll save, and let me copy this and paste it. Copy, and I'll paste it here. Enter. Okay, so everything is set up now. Let's go to the next step. We have created the access key as well, and everything is done. Let's configure the Kubernetes cluster, which is done already. We have auto scaled as well. Let's go to the next step, install tools. So we already have kubectl, so we don't have to worry about it. Let's create a Kubernetes namespace, and the name of our namespace is going to be my production service. You can name it anything you want, but I'm naming it my production service. So a namespace has been created, and the next step is to set the context to current namespace. So for ease of use, set the new namespace as default. So whatever we are going to do will be inside this namespace. So let's go ahead and do it. Let's set the context to this namespace. And as you can see, that context has been modified. Let's deploy Hydrolix now. And as you can see that this is a file that we'll have to download. But since I'm on a Windows based system, I cannot directly download this file using this command. Why? Because I will have to change this command, or rather tweak this command such that I download this file. And curl works a little bit differently on Windows. So you'll have to do something like this: curl -o, the name of the file and the URL. And the moment you copy this command and paste it, let me paste it in the integrated terminal. If I paste it here, you can paste it here as well, by the way. Operator.yaml will be downloaded, and I'll show you that it will contain the namespace as my production service, because we already have the okay. So the thing is that this variable is not defined here, so I'll have to fire it here. My bad, let me close this. And operator.yaml has been downloaded, and you'll see the namespace as my production service. So namespace is already coming here. Okay, now let's move on to the next step. Generate hydrolixcluster.yaml config. Now that the environment is set up, create the Hydrolix configuration and fill in the detail. So we'll create this file hydrolixcluster.yaml and we'll paste the content. So let's paste the content. And yes, now they are running a command which is automatically evaluating all these environment variables. But since I'm on Windows, I'll automatically fill it. You can also do it using command line, but for the sake of simplicity, let me fill in the values of the bucket region and the bucket URL. And I'll also name the namespace here, bucket URL. And then Hydrolix, so this is the Hydrolix URL and this is the bucket URL. Bucket URL, okay. And then email. Let me copy this. And yes. Then Kubernetes namespace is my production service. Kubernetes namespace, my production service, and same goes here as well. And yes, our file is ready. Now the last step that you'll have to do is to punch in your IP address, and you can either go to Google and type my IP address and you'll see your IP address, or you can also run this command. They have this command which you can run to find out your IP address. Curl -is ipconfig.me. Let's paste this here. So my IP address is here, which means that I'm allowed to access everything from here. Otherwise, I'll not be able to access Hydrolix from here. Okay, so this is the IP allow list. Awesome. Now let's run this command. kubectl apply -f operator.yaml. And the moment I run this, the Hydrolix will be deployed. So we'll wait for Hydrolix to deploy. And yes, it is creating all the services. It is doing its work. Awesome. Let's wait for this to finish and then we'll execute the next command, which is kubectl apply hydrolixcluster.yaml. And let's wait for this to finish. And yeah, everything is working. Now let's apply hydrolixcluster.yaml. And yes, the cluster has been created. So this is how you install Hydrolix on your Kubernetes cluster. And you can also enable auto-scaling, which means that based off this configuration, your Kubernetes cluster will auto-scale Hydrolix. Okay, so let's copy this file and let's put it inside autoscale.yaml. So I'll put it inside autoscale.yaml and I'll save it, and I'll copy this command and I'll paste it here. And the moment I paste it here, yes, it is creating everything. And after this is finished, you will be able to access Hydrolix. So you can now create a DNS record. You can run kubectl get services, and then from the load balancer IP, you can copy this, the load balancer IP, and you'll have to go to your domains. And in my case, I'll go to huntingcoder.com and I'll point the A record of my.textutils.com of my subdomain. I'll put the subdomain as my, and after putting the subdomain as my, I'll simply copy the IP address from load balancer from the output of my kubectl get services once they are deployed, and I'll paste it here. And once Hydrolix is deployed, I'll be able to use Hydrolix from my domain, and then you can go ahead and read the documentation which will show you how to exactly use Hydrolix. So you can start using Hydrolix after it is deployed. So I hope that you understood how to install Hydrolix on your machine. I hope this video was helpful. Thank you so much guys for watching this video, and I will see you next time.